You're listening to the Literary Lounge with Dawn Bates on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM. Right then, folks, welcome to this week's show. Now, this is going to be a little bit different because I have been asked by those who have been listening to my show, we want to see a bit more of Dawn. I was like, what? They're like, well, you're sticking quite safe to some of the issues that are happening, and you're not mentioning certain things, and there's certain songs that you're not playing, and so I thought, what, after being in the gym on Friday last week for Burn with the lovely Ellie, she played some tunes, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've not heard this for years. So I'm going to play you some of those, and I'm going to talk about a few bits and pieces. Some of them are probably a bit controversial for Radio Cardiff on a Friday morning, but again, I'm known for being controversial. Who knew? And I did finish Miriam Margolyes' book. I have finished that, so there's a couple of things I want to mention from that. Yeah, so we've got 8 tunes that I've downloaded ready for me to play this week, and I've got a bit of a week planned because I'm off to Geneva to the Palace of Nations at the UN next week, so quite a busy week. So I will be pre-recording next week's show and sending that in. So yeah, I'm giving you how things work behind the scenes, because if we can't show up, then it's always good to have a pre-recorded show as a backup, just to make sure that your listening pleasure is not interrupted. Love that, listening pleasure. I would normally say your reading pleasure, but there we go. So anyway, Miriam Margolyes. That lady, goodness gracious me. And I love that. I disagree with some of the things she said at the end of her book. But that's great. I love disagreeing with people because I get to learn. I get to hear different people's perspectives, and I get to love those parts of them that I disagree with. And there are some times when it's not just a difference of opinion, though. It's a difference of values. Now, we're seeing a huge amount of difference of values across Britain at the moment, because we've had the local elections, and there's been a change at the Senate. I can't comment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. We're not allowed to. But let's just say that things are going to be a little bit different, aren't they? And I've actually been thinking, because I do have a podcast, which is what this show doesn't just go out on Radio Cardiff. The Literary Lounge does go out on my podcast. It goes out on my YouTube channel. I'm actually thinking of doing the Literary Lounge unfiltered, so I get to really show up and have those kind of conversations. Because, as you know, I'm a bit of a word nerd, and I love the books and all things literature. And with that comes critical thinking. With that comes critical analysis. But I'm seeing that a lot of people, people are just not thinking anymore. And I was watching, I'm staying with friends at the moment. They had the news on last night, and there was a news article that came on about the UK adoption scandal. And it was horrendous, and I just think, how could anybody treat a baby like that? Because the crux of the whole argument, or the crux, I can't really say argument, but the crux of the adoption scandal refers to something that was going on during the 1950s and the 1970s, where it was saying that children of mixed heritage were frequently deemed unadoptable. I've made notes, obviously. And there was this place where women would go if they're unmarried mothers, about 180, 190,000, depending on which source you're looking at. And these young mothers were made to give up their children. And that in itself is just, I can't imagine. If someone said to me I had to get rid of Khalid and Nasser, oh my God, I would fight. And I'm rewriting, as you know, Crossing the Line at the moment. So if you've read that or you're planning on reading it, you will find out how much I am willing to fight for my children. And I believe that a lot of women would do, and a lot of parents would do. Dads don't get much of a chance. So, which I think is wrong. Because if the woman doesn't want the child, but the dad does, then you know you did the deed. It's 9 months of your life, love. Have the baby, give it to the father. If the father wants it, that's not a very popular opinion. And yes, it might be your body, but you took the action, and you did the deed that got you there. So, again, not a very popular opinion, but it is my opinion, and we're all entitled to them. Like, some of the things that Miriam Margolyes wrote in the end of her book. We all have a difference of opinion, and we're all coming from a different perspective, whether it's a faith-based, religious-based, social economic class. And again, it's like this whole not white enough adoption scandal. It it brings it home to me as a white mother with Arab children. And the reason why it brings it home to me is because, I've seen how people look at me, and I know what I've been through, with the racism and people not believing that my children could be of a different colour, or when I've been called a traitor, I've been spat on. And, I've experienced that racism, and sometimes from people that I didn't think I would ever um, I would ever experience that from. Now, before we really get into the conversation, I do want to play a song, just to break things up again before we really get into it, because I do want to go on to the MBE that was awarded to the Lioness, and we'll come on to that afterwards. But I really wanted to set the scene, so we're gonna have a bit of Parov, Stella, and Lena Sue here, drum. Beaten to play into the beat of your own drum. So that's what today is really about, and not really caring, whilst being considerate of other people. So that's the song that you're going to hear now, and then we'll get back onto the subject of this adoption and the Lioness model and racism that I've experienced. So that was a really great song. I hope you liked that song. Again, beat the rhythm of your own drum. This is what it's about. It's about us, being and living life the way we want to live it, and being free of other people's judgments. And going back to the news article that we saw last night, how have we got to the point where we are still really no further forward in a lot of ways? And I did find that there was a lack of critical thinking, in the two stories that played almost side by side last night, because Kerry Davis absolutely deserves an MBE for showing up, and it's not just the fact that because she's black, but it is because I remember when I was at school, there were 3 black people in my entire school. There was Ella, and she would say, "I'm black, black." That's what she would say. And honestly, she's so funny. And then you had Daryl, who was of mixed race, and then Catherine, who was mixed race, or mixed ethnicity, as I prefer to say. And I'm just really trying to figure out my words, because I know that some words here in Britain are not allowed, but they are allowed in the States, and they are allowed in a lot of the other countries that I've been in. And again, like navigating this world and navigating, these conversations without offending people or upsetting people. We're all going to get offended and upset about something, but it's about us looking into why we're offended or upset about a certain thing. Now, absolutely, these people that have grown up feeling rejected, they were taken away from their mother. I mean, anyone tries to take my children away from me, I will come for you, and you will feel the mama fire, the feminine fire, the Sagittarian fire. You'll feel all the fire, and I will burn you to the ground. I'm that mother that says to the boys, do I need to bring barrel and an acid? We all know this, but we all know that I'm the one that's going to help them bury a body if they ever need to. And, I don't expect the police officer to come knocking on my door or down to Radio Cardiff. I'm not condoning violence. It's a very playful conversation, but it just represents, I will do whatever it is to protect my children if they're in the wrong. Sorry, if they're in the right. If they're in the wrong, I'm going to be, why did you do this? I'm not someone who's going to protect my boys from, life. They make a mistake, they've got to take the consequences, as we were saying in the first part of the show. But again, it's like when people look at me and my children, and they see that we're all different shades, shall we say. I remember when we were at nursery when the youngest one was at nursery, and a little boy asked me, why are you like white chocolate and your the NASA is like milk chocolate, but your big boy, he's darker chocolate. I'm like, because we all love chocolate. I had to respond to the little boy in his own way. And I said, well, our skin is just different. It responds to the sun differently. And their daddy is Arabic. And, he has different skin tones. And, you really try and explain it to kids so that they grow up and becomes not a thing for them. And it's not that we don't see colour, because to not see colour is another level of ignorance. But when that's all we see, and we don't see beyond that. We don't see the human with all the feelings and the emotions and the hopes and the dreams and the fears and, the excitement and, the generosity and the love that they have to give. And these mothers being taken to these homes and having their child taken away from them and being promised that they're going to a good life, and they're not being taken, they're not even being given a chance at a good life, because they're being told that because of the color of their skin that they don't deserve anything, and that they weren't even acknowledged as human. And for me, it's no different to what we're seeing with, how the Zionists are treating the Palestinians. And this is something that Miriam Margolyes mentioned in her book. And how if you stand up for the Palestinians, you can't, then you're becoming an anti-Semite. But it's like, well, the Palestinians are one of 5 Semitic people. So how does that make me an anti-Semite? And I'm not against Jewish people. I'm just against Zionism. And even Miriam mentions this in her book, that, the people are so blurred with their understanding. People don't know the difference between a religion, an ethnicity, and a nation, and the culture. And she talks about it quite openly, saying that, she doesn't believe in God. She's Jewish by culture. I mean, we know that you can't be Jewish by ethnicity, but there are certain ethnicities that are predominantly Jewish, just like a lot of white people, whether they're British or whether they are, or English, shall we say, or whether they are, uh, the country Ukrainian. I couldn't think of the other huge amount of refugees that we've had here in the country, in the immigration. They're predominantly Christian. And so that, if you go to certain parts of India, then you'll see lots of people that are predominantly Hindu or Sikh. Or you go to the Arab world, you have a large population that are Muslim, but you also have a huge amount of population that are Christian or Jewish. And when people talk about, Jesus, and he was Jewish, but he was also a Palestinian, and people don't understand all of these things, and there's all this hatred that's created. And you just think, if only people could see the good in each other. Because as with any child or any dog, if this is the thing, and I am using a dog because there are some people that, are surprised that my dog understands different languages and that my dog is so well behaved. But I've trained my dog, and, when you've got these children that, have, when children are just left to run riot and they're not disciplined, and you've got parents bribing their children or not teaching boundaries, as I wrote about in my article weeks ago, it takes time to for people to be brainwashed by certain things, or people to be, guided in a way of wanting peace and giving love to other people. When you look at children, they don't, it was shocking for me in some ways that young child asked why me and my children were different shades of color, because, he was of a certain age that, he was leaving nursery, so he was becoming more inquisitive. But the fact that they asked the question showed more about the lack of diversity in their own community. And one of the things Miriam Margolyes mentioned was when she met will.i.am on the Graham Norton show, and she was surprised because she'd never met a black person. She didn't have black people in her community. And I think, how do we get to being in 2026 and that be a thing? I grew up in a very white community and it was royally racist, and I exposed the racism in my first book, Friday Bridge. And I know that my family weren't very keen on the idea of me writing certain things. I'm like, well, no, they need to be addressed. You know, the fact that I married an Arab was bad enough for a lot of people. And I was told, you know, he's going to lock you in a cupboard and he's going to beat you and he's going to this. And I was like, well, better not. Well, if he does, I might as well put a bookshelf in there because, you know, I want to be it might be perfect reading sanctuary if he locks me in the cupboard. At least I've got peace and quiet and, you know, I've got all my books with me. Hope he puts biscuits in there as well. And I would laugh it off. But it would show them their own ignorance. And you know, and I would play it back to them. And this is the thing about these news articles, when you see them positioned and people aren't making those connections to what's being said or what's being reported on, it's like, how can we say what those people within the system, the government system, how can we condemn them when we're not condemning certain organizations or parties or, you know, certain groups that are in the world today? Because we haven't really evolved. Uh, and we're still, it just baffles me because children have this natural loving instinct within them, and we do have to teach them that, you know, some things are not safe. You can't eat that, you can't, you know, you can't go and you can't touch that, don't touch stinging nettles, you know, they'll hurt you, but you can drink them. You can drink nettles and have nettle tea, it's a good antihistamine. And it's all of these things that, you know, we guide children, learn these prejudices and these ignorances. And but again, coming back to literature, how all this relates to literature, well, the more we read, the more we understand the world. And I'm not just talking about reading all of these, you know, because I am a big fan of non-fiction. I do read fiction, and I think that there's a lot of value in fiction. I love it. I'm about to read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So I'm going from two biographies, you know, the Miriam Goyles one and the Giselle Pellicot book. And somebody else is agreeing with me that it's not a very well written book. But there we go, because of who she is and who she's become, you know, it's sold incredibly well. Again, you know, but again, it's like how we bring people together and how we can just make sure that things in the past don't happen again. But why did it take so long for somebody like the lioness, you know, Kerry Davis? I nearly called her David Kerry then, sorry. But why did it take so long for someone like Kerry? I mean, fabulous face of freckles. I was so jealous of her freckles last night. I was like, oh my God, look at her freckles. I love freckles. I love my freckles. Why did it take someone of colour so long to be accepted onto the England rugby team? Because there's not enough access to for people of colour. There's not enough inclusion. And this is in 2026. This is in 1990, you know, 2000. And have we really progressed from 1950 in a lot of ways? And when we look at what's going on in certain communities, I would say no, we haven't. There's still so much ignorance. You know, you go to a business event here in Cardiff and it's still predominantly white male. You know, this next song that I'm going to play, it talks about how, you know, when you're talking about certain things that are going on within, you know, the friendship groups, you know, you can be bitching and moaning about something, or you can actually be discussing an idea and a solution. How can we make the world a better place? How can we make each other's relationships better? How can we make ourselves better human beings? How can we achieve to be more and aspire? And actually, when we rise up, how are we helping other people to rise up? why are so many people only thinking of themselves and the way things were? We want to keep things the way they were. No, we want to progress. That's the whole point of human nature. That's the whole point of humanity, that, we do progress forward. We don't hang on to the past. We learn from the past, absolutely. And I am a bit old school, as you will hear from some of my tunes that I'm going to play. But I think we all really need to have the right conversations, and and discuss and explore all of these conversations that some people might think are a bit taboo and that are not allowed to be discussed. But if we don't discuss them, how are we ever going to learn? How are we ever going to um, you know come together as a people? But I could go on and on about this, and I probably will. But I'm going to play you this song now, and then it's the news and the weather, and then also a few ads, I believe. So here we go. This is Dennis with Nevermind.
You're listening to the Literary Lounge with Dawn Bates on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM.
So that was the news and the weather and some ads. And yeah, so again, going back into it, bringing each other together and learning about one another and sharing food and music. And, and music for me has always been one of the greatest things, because especially electronic dance music, because it didn't matter. The lyrics a lot of the time weren't important, because it was the heartbeat that brought us all together. It was that rhythm. It was that dirty fat bass lines. It was the unity. I mean, the rave scene back in the 90s was all about peace, love, and unity. You did have some that added respect on the end of it, so it was plur, and we all wore our Adidas, or some people wore Kappas, and we had the Kappa boys. But I was more the Adidas girls. But again, it was looking, we were dressed as sweat. We were there, we were in it, we were, really, we were loved up. And I'm not condoning the use of drugs, but it is a fact of life that, a lot of us, my age and beyond, and, from the younger ones, that it is a fact of life. And it is something that does happen. And again, I'm not condoning the use of them, but I'm not also going to deny who I am and what has made me me. And when I was reading Miriam Margolyes's book, it was something that, if you're a bit smutty and you're an old lady and you're very well spoken, you can get away with it. She is absolutely, against people who don't have a vaccine. And, but again, we were divided. If you didn't have the COVID vaccine, then you were accused of killing everybody, and you were the one that was ostracized. I know a lot of people that, didn't have it, and some people lost their income, they lost their their family, removed them. But they just wanted time to consider it. Hang on a second, why is this happening? Why did this happen so quickly when it takes 10 to 12 years to create a vaccine? People were asking smart questions. They were analysing the data. They were thinking critically. But that was condemned. People weren't allowed to think critically. We all had to become this homogenized Borg. When I say Borg, those of you who haven't watched Star Trek, what have you been doing? I mean, seriously, Star Trek. Is it Star Trek? Yeah, Star Trek. So I just thought, I definitely don't think it was Star Wars, but Star Trek. I love the Star Trek, because it was like you had all of these different aliens from all these different places. They looked differently, they spoke differently, they communicated differently. They all lived a lot of the time in harmony, and it was only certain, like the Klingon, their makeup was so cool. But they were rogue individuals within a species that made it really problematic for others. And that is what we're seeing, that there are a small number of people who are not educated, who haven't travelled, who have been brainwashed by interfering other people. It's that when people find out that I travelled the world by myself, they're like, but weren't you scared? I'm like, what was I scared of? They're like, well, weren't you scared of being murdered or raped or kidnapped and all of these things? I was like, no. But you were in foreign lands. It's like, well, you, I mean, again, to use the Welsh word, well, the word, the name of Wales, the Welsh Wales is, it's the word that England gave to we called, as English folk, we called Wales Wales, a land of foreigners. That's what Wales means. That's why I don't like to use it, because it's your home, it's your nation. Um, why would anyone want to call people foreigners in their own land? And again, it looks at the conditioning that's happened, that the colonialism that has been embraced. And I was asking someone recently, why don't you have .cymru? Instead of .co.uk or .com, why don't we have .cymru? Why are the Welsh businesses not using that? If you're Welsh and proud, or Cymru proud, then like, maybe that's something that Plaid Cymru can introduce. You've got .cymru at the end of your name and the end of your website. That would be so cool for a lot of people, I think. But not everybody thinks like me. That's probably a good thing, but it's probably not. But it is what it is. I like it when I am around people that are different from me, and that think differently to me, and have different experiences and ideas and political views, and because we all can get together and we can learn from each other, and it's exciting. It's like, oh, I've learned something new, and I get excited. That's why I read so much about the world that I'm in, and I love reading new ideas and concepts and new languages, and it's just so good. It's just enriches your life so much. Yes, you can tell I'm excited. And yes, Derek, I am getting chopsy again, and I am going around the houses. And this is something that we were talking about. Some of the messages I'm getting from you love the fact that I go around all these circles and then I bring it back and it all gets wrapped up. That's what we do as writers. You take people on a journey and you bring it all back, and it really, anyway. Um, Now, this next song that I'm going to play is from, I'm not playing the rave version of it. I did have to find the radio edit of this one. But this is all about a city in the States that was saying, all of us come together, put your hands up for Detroit, because it was a melting pot of immigration and ethnicities and foods and music and cultures and fabrics, and oh, it was just wonderful. And it's one of the reasons why I love the song. So that's why I'm going to play it. And I do feel that it all works really well with the theme of today, of introducing you a bit more about me and a few controversial subjects. So this is Fed Legrand with Put Your Hands Up for Detroit. Oh, so good. Put your hands up. Okay. Anyway, before I get off on another like lost in the rave, like eyes closed, hands in the air. But this is one of the beautiful things about Detroit. And when I lived in Scarborough in Toronto in Canada, I loved it because there were people from all over the world living together. But when you told certain people that that's where you live, they were like, "Why would you live there?" I'm like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I live there? Well, like, you've got all those foreigners there, all those immigrants. I was like, okay, well, you're Canadian, right? You're an immigrant, you know. Why are you even like the Canada? Canada doesn't, most of the white people that live in Canada, they're from Scotland, they're from England, they're from, just other countries that it was the indigenous communities, that the native Indians that live there. And again, looking at the Indian schools in Canada and in America, well, North America, the Indian schools of North America, they were horrendous. But again, these are children that were taken from their parents to cleanse them, to remove the Indian from them, to save their soul from the devil. Horrendous abuse that these people went through, these children. Some of the things that oh God, and it makes me so cross. Now, I mentioned a couple of shows ago about, while I was traveling, that there were in Winnipeg, there's a huge campaign that was going on about how 4,000 women, Indigenous women, had gone missing. But those 4,000 were only 11% of the women that had gone missing. And the only reason why they were focusing on the Indigenous women was because of the apology and the shame and the way in which they were like, okay, we need to make amends for what we did to the native Indian community when we arrived, and we stole their land and we tried to rid them of their beliefs and their language and their cultures, because obviously they'd got it wrong, because you know we're white, we're British, we know what's best, we're Christian, we know what's best. No, we don't. No, we don't. I mean, gosh, look at the mental health issues that we've got here in, the Western world, because of all of the things that we think we're brilliant at, but we're actually not. So you're really getting a dose of dawn today. Now, if you have, actually, speaking of dose of dawn, if you haven't already, make sure you head on over to my website and actually have a look at some of the articles that I'm writing at the moment and have been writing on there for many years. But again, going back to the Detroit and the Scarborough, I loved it. Loved it. And Detroit was a very unique city in the States during the time of that tune coming out. And it was all about togetherness. It was about us going, you know what, we're different. All of us are different. I mean, you only have to look at your own family. When I look at my brother and sister, I'm like, oh yeah, nothing in common, like their belief system, their political views, their racial views, our life, look, the way we look at life and success, and and like work and all of that. I mean, I probably read more books in a month than my brother and sister have read in a week. I'm sorry, in their whole life. But we're from the same parents, but we're so vastly different. Um, I'm more of a redhead now, and my sister's going, whereas my brother was more auburn when we were younger. He's going grey. So his is proper auburn, is it? Because we don't go grey, we just go a lighter shade. Apparently, according to my friend Lara, who is adamant that gingers don't go white. And I think hers is just out of a bottle, really. Sorry, Lara. But again, the whole thing about, when we're looking at the world in which we live in, I know that some of the things I've said on today's show is going to offend people, and it's probably it's not going to go down very well. And someone said to me, "You're not very British, are you?" I'm like, no, I am, because being British is being inclusive of everybody, because that's the Britain I grew up in. I grew up in a Britain where we had people from South Asia come over and rebuild Britain after the war. It's their home, it's their country. I know people that my grandfather is Scottish on my mother's paternal side. My great grandfather, I believe, on my father's paternal side, he's Welsh. I think he's my great grandfather. He might be great uncle or something. But again, I know I've got the Celtic fire within me. I wouldn't be a redhead with hazel eyes and freckles if I didn't. And you don't get this much fire and connection to earth if you don't. Well, that's a sweeping observation and stereotype. But again, when we're looking at, the world in which we live in and how things are changing, but there's this thing about the more we evolve, the more we stay the same. And I read that theory. It's a Red Queen theory, by a scientist, popular scientist, and it was written by. Let me just find out. I normally can reel this book off the top of my head. The Red Queen Theory book. It was written by Matt Ridley. Oh, if you haven't read Matt Ridley books, please go and read them. This man, I mean, I don't agree with his politics, but I love his popular science. It helps me understand science in a much easier way than other authors that write about science. I mean, I'm someone. I mean, I sat on a beach and read The Brief History of Time by what's his face, Dave Clark. Good for you, dude. Oh, what's his name? The astrophysicist dude in the wheelchair. Oh, I'm really having a menopausal moment. A Brief History of Time. I really am not. Stephen Hawkins. Sorry, those of you who know what I was just referencing, Um, One of the rave tracks actually sampled Stephen Hawking's book, and it was like Dave Clark, Good for You. And it was such a cool tune back in the 90s. So now whenever I think of Stephen Hawking, I just think of Dave Clark, Good for You, because of the voice sampling that was done. But again, Matt Ridley, um, brilliant science. It helps me understand science. So if you are fascinated by science, but you can't really get your head around it, Matt Ridley is going to help you do that. Again, I don't agree with a lot of his politics, just like I don't agree with certain other people. Again, Miriam, my God, show up as yourself. Going back to the first song that I played about, the drum, the oh, what's his name? Parov Stella. Okay, so I'm doing a menopause talk. And I'm proper full in like menopause fog at the moment. I am also distracted by health issues. Like I said earlier, like I had a load of blood taken, and because I've got certain things that we're investigating at the moment, and they took samples of my blood, and they took a lot of blood. But my blood is such a beautiful colour. Oh my God, it's so lovely. I said I want to get a colour swatch and make a dress out of it. Not out of the blood, obviously. That would just be disgusting. Like the Met Gala was disgusting. I absolutely cannot stand what we saw at the Met Gala. Everything the Met Gala stands for is beyond. Yes, the tickets fund a library, but really, seriously, what a disgusting exhibition are. And like some of those costumes, the way in which they mocked hunger and starvation and genocide around the world, and the £100,000 tickets, I think, were the cheapest. The amount that could have been done with those tickets, with the money raised, but it was, for me, it was the costumes that they wore that depicted I was just like, oh my gosh, you could really tell the ignorance, but also the politics of a lot of people that attended that. And what's made it really, really more insulting is the amount of big publishers that are all over it. They're like, oh, it's so great. Yeah, no, yeah, they fund a library. Great. How many people get access to that library? What kind of books are in that library? What kind of political leaning is in that library? And would I want to be in a room full of people who are that ignorant about what's going on in the world and actually I mean, one woman wore a dress that looked like the colon. Yeah, absolutely. Like it, you know, the one that got me, I depicting starving children with your skeleton outfit. And some of them were just, they were in such poor taste. But then some people would say that Ricky Gervais is in poor taste. Uh, I kind of like Ricky Gervais though. I like his, he's a very intelligent, very astute writer. And I like it when he hosts award ceremonies and he calls the people in Hollywood on it. Like he said, if ISIS started a streaming service, they'd call their agent. And they probably would. No, they most likely would because they're in it to make money. And one of the songs I'm going to play the next hour is, I think it's going to make some of you smile. But again, this is me. This is who I am. I'm not going to hide who I am just to please other people, because the moment we go into people pleasing, the more we lose a piece of ourselves. And people say to me, yeah, but you've changed your accent. And I know that if we spoke like this, which is how I used to speak when I was younger, I wouldn't have got as far as I did. And so this next song that I'm going to play is by Gorillaz. It's called Dare, and it's a take on the Mancunian accent. And I absolutely love Gorillaz. So this is a nod to accents.
You're listening to the Literary Lounge with Dawn Bates on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM.
There you go. That was the news and the weather. And so before we were talking about the variations of society and what we can you know, the differences in us. And I was mentioning like the Mancunian accent, which is what the song is Dare by Gorillaz. Um, the reason why it was called Dare was because when the singer of the Gorillaz was saying in his Mancunian accent, it was Shaun Ryder, that's it. He was saying it's there, as in the volume was coming up, it's coming up. And but because of the way it sounded in the recording studio, um, it ended up being misinterpreted. And that's what happens a lot of the time when we don't get to know each other, when we don't travel, when we don't even travel outside of our community, like go to the next town or the next city. So many misconceptions happen, so many misunderstandings happen. And if we're not willing to step outside of ourselves and we're not willing to learn about other people, then all this fear happens. And again, going back to the not white enough adoption scandal, people were afraid of people that looked different, people that had got different ideas. This happens with religious hatred, or it comes from different nationalities. We're made so paranoid by the media. We're made so paranoid by people that have had a bad experience. So, my mother-in-law, before she passed away, she went to Barcelona. And she said she'd never go back to Barcelona because she got robbed. I'm like, yeah, but people get robbed in Cairo all the time, because she was from Cairo. People get robbed in London all the time. They get robbed everywhere. It's not unique to Barcelona. And I remember when I was living in Costa Rica, and I was heading off down to a place called La Carpio. Now, La Carpio is a place where there is a lot of Nicaraguan refugees, people that have, escaped the Contra War, third, fourth generation refugees there. They're really trying to make something of themselves, but they're living with such trauma that they are numbing their pain, or they've numbed their pain, and people have had to make a living in one way or another that they could. But the problem is that a lot of the Ticas, the people from Costa Rica, they don't want the Nicaraguans there because they're from the other side of the border. And so there's this thing where they don't want to employ the Nicaraguans. And we're seeing it here, in Britain. Like when you see all the Ukrainians that came over, we had 186,000 Ukrainians come over in a year. We opened our schools to them, we opened our businesses, our homes, and we welcomed them in. In 5 years, we only had 88,000 people come over from Europe. Whether they were the Albanians or whether they were the Arabs from various different regions. But people are like, oh, we've got all these people coming across on the boat. No, we haven't. We had almost 100,000 people more in 1 year from Ukraine than we did come over in 5 years. But because they were a different color or a different religion, we didn't accept them. We didn't open our homes to them. We didn't open the schools to them. We didn't open our businesses to them to give them jobs. And like I was saying earlier, when Khalid tried to apply for a job, he was applying for jobs, but because of his name, people just refused him. There is still an undercurrent of racism here in Britain, and it's ugly. It's really ugly. And it will manifest itself in different ways. I remember when me and my ex-husband, we separated. I had people who I thought were friends. You're going to come back to the right side of the colour divide now, Dawn? Are you coming back to the English guys? And I was shocked by it. I said, oh my God, you've been my friend for so long. And then just also when my children were born. So I remember someone saying to me about Nasser, oh, at least he's whiter than the other one. And I was like, what kind of person says that? So even though what the events that happened in the 1950s to the 1970s, it was horrific what people thought. But when you look at the lack of travel that people had done, and you look at the lack of education and the lack of migration into the smaller areas, you can understand it to a certain degree, but I can't understand it today. I really can't. For me, it's just like, why are we still having this conversation 80 years later? why? It doesn't make sense to me at all. Um, you know, and when you're looking at how people are, some people don't want to shop in certain places, they don't want to buy products from certain places, they don't want to be employed, and but they want the money, and they need to do these things for to live, and some people, they have to go to desperate measures, and it does make me cross, and it does make me wonder, the kind of world that we're living in. It really does. And I remember when I was at the political hustings last week with Cardiff University, I actually was overheard saying that, if there is a particular party that if they get in, I'd rather drink bleach, or I'd rather bleach my eyes out. I don't want anything to do with that party. I really hope that the nation doesn't see them get in, but I can't talk politics. I can't name them, because that's not my role here. But my role here is about literacy. It's about helping people understand. And the more we read, the more we learn about the world we're in. Um, and I know that this song that I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be playing you next, is slightly off the wall, or it might seem it. But when I finish playing it, I'll explain to you why I chose it. Because one of my employees, in my very first business, when she was working for me, she was of a Jamaican background, and she said that she didn't want to work for me because she didn't want white people's money. And so this song I feel really fits in with that. So this is Dirty Cash. That was a flashback to the past. Now, as I said, that was Dirty Cash, Money Talks, and that was by The Adventures of Stevie V. Now that goes back to the 90s. I think it's like 1990. And it's a song that explores how influence and um, the the corruption of people. Now we're seeing quite a lot of corrupt power at the moment. We've always Power also has corrupted people for millennia, and well, for centuries. When you go back to like the 9th and 10th century, when people were like, you've got families that marry into money for title and prestige, and we moan about child marriages, and we moan about organized marriages or arranged marriages from certain cultures. But then when you look at the British aristocracy, you'll see that child marriages, children were promised to each other and they were married off, to maintain the fact that, the wealth and the status and the stately homes and all the properties and all of that stayed in particular families or in certain hands. And also it looks at that relentless pursuit of money and wealth, and how it can be really destructive. And this is why I always say to people, know where your money goes, follow the money, because if you choose to spend your money wisely, and you choose to spend your money ethically, you won't be supporting a lot of the companies that you support now. Now we're seeing a lot of these influencers on social media, and they'll be supporting certain countries. People will be shopping at Zara, but they don't realize that that's that a lot of the big execs of Zara and a lot of the profits of Zara, they go towards the Zionism. Then you'll be looking at Shein, the sweatshops in China, and how some of the working conditions of people that work for the manufacturers that manufacture clothing for Primark and Matalan's and Shein and all of these other places, where people can buy fast fashion. What are we doing to destroy our country? But it's okay, because it doesn't stay in this country. It goes somewhere else. It goes to, it's out of sight, out of mind. Plastic never goes away. Most of our clothing is made of plastic of one form or another. It's not sustainable. The living wage is not sustainable. The wages that people are being paid is absolutely horrendous. And yes, I volunteer for this radio station. We all do. We give up our time, we plan these shows, we record them in advance if we can't make it. And we give our time, and someone will go, but it's all right for you, you can give that time. And it's like, well, actually, it's not about it being all right for us. And I remember when I met my ex-husband, and there was a really split reaction. He was either going to be a really rich oil Gulf Arab, which was okay, But if he wasn't that, then he was going to be locking me in the cupboard and beating me and doing all the other things that these Arab husbands do, all these Muslim husbands do, and like, people were really horrified, and I'm like, oh my God, it's 1996 when I met him. Why are we still having these views? But again, we are now 30 years later, and people still have these views. And it's, why do we still have these? But then again, when we look at, and I was talking to a friend of mine, he's from the Western Sahara, and he was like, yeah, but it's also the same. People blame white people for slavery, but black people were always also traders, and so were the Arabs. They were also slave traders. Everybody was trading in slaves. Everybody was trading in something that was harming someone else. The living conditions. You employ people to do a job that you don't want to do yourself. You employ people to do things that you would rather not do yourself. And it's absolutely true, because when I'm coaching people to set up a business and actually grow their business, what jobs do you absolutely hate? What needs to be done? What jobs do you like doing? What jobs do you not really want to do but you'll do? But what do you absolutely love doing? And once you know those four columns, then you know where to delegate your work. Do I have experience in, investment banking and crypto and, accounting systems? I've got an idea of accounting systems. I've had to learn it as a businesswoman. I understand how to make profit and return on investment. But do I understand crypto? No. So if I want to trade on crypto, I'm going to need someone to actually do that for me. If I want to, make a lot more money from my money, then I have to go to somebody who knows how to do that brilliantly. If I want to get my hair done, and trust me, you don't want me to do your hair unless you want to, like, grade zero all over. Like, give me a pair of clippers and a Bic razor and I'm your girl. Give me a pair of scissors. Yeah, not so much. Not a very wise decision. Want me to make you some clothing? Again, not a wise decision. I know what I like. I know what I want to wear. And it's not a lot of plastic, that's for sure. Linen, cottons, wool, natural fibres. I'm in the menopause, ladies and gentlemen. I do not want to be wearing plastic clothing. I want natural fibres so my skin can breathe, my body can breathe. And we also have to remember that wearing all of these really cheap fabrics, all these plastics, actually reduces our vibrations, and actually the microfibers get into our skin, into our bodies, especially if we're wearing, underwear that's made of the plastic. These microfibers get into our bodies. And if you haven't yet seen it, there's a documentary on Netflix. Now, I would also do my research on the lady who does this and the books that she's written, because it was absolutely incredible learning about the plastic detox. Is the documentary. Now, the woman who wrote the book, the Plastic Detox, Dr. Shana Swan, she's written quite a number of books, and learning about her, she's an award-winning scientist from New York, and she has published like hundreds of scientific papers, and she is the author of a book called Countdown, which made me smile, because I thought of Carol Vorderman, and I was like, oh yeah, I do love a conundrum. Not so quick on the math subjects though, but a conundrum, yes, and the words, yes, loved it. Give us a count, give us a consonant, please, Carol. But yeah, Dr. Shana Swan, the research that she's done has now been put into this documentary, and it looks at how the plastic causes us to have infertility. It causes us to have microfibers in our body, which causes pleurisy. It causes, infection, and also obesity. And a lot of people don't understand that. They're not even aware of that because they're not reading. So they're waiting for people like Shana to make these documentaries to actually educate them. But it's also good to go and read the books. And it's like, again, with all of the books that I've written, we're working on producing documentaries because we know that there is, even though the subjects we write about at DBI, these are subjects that people need to know about. But a lot of people are not willing to read because they were either made fun of at school or they didn't have access to the education that helped them that learn to read in an enjoyable way or see it from their point of view, or they were told their point of view didn't matter or it wasn't valid or they were wrong for understanding something that way. The way you understand something is never wrong. It's your way of understanding. Could it be developed? Absolutely. But so could anybody else's. So I'm a big advocate, and it's like I don't really agree with forcing certain novels on children in school. When I used to teach in schools, I used to say, right, these are the books that we have to read this term. These are, so which ones, who, this is what this book is about, this is what this one's about, and so on and so forth. Who wants to read this book? And I'd get them to volunteer to read a certain book, and then we would pitch the books to each other at the end of the week. And this is what I've learned from it. This is what I'm enjoying. This is what I don't like. I don't understand this. And we would work together as a class. And what we actually found was everybody would end up reading all the books because everybody had a voice. Everybody got to choose. It wasn't forced upon them. But I couldn't teach that way here in Britain. I could teach that when I worked overseas, but not here in Britain, because the way we're not taught to think, we're not taught to discuss or disagree. It's not, we it's almost as if there is one answer, and there isn't. There's never one answer to reading a book. And I've said it before, every time you read a book, you're reading a different version of it to the person who read it before you, or the person who's reading it at the same time. Everybody's version of the book is so very different. And this is why I say, the more we travel, the more we learn about other people, the more we learn about ourselves, whether that is where we're traveling through time into history and looking at what happened so we can prevent things from happening, or we actually travel outside of our community or outside of our religious group or outside of our school or, outside of our country. The more we learn about each other, the better the world is going to be. Now, as you know, I love traveling. Yeah, absolutely love it. And one of the things I want to talk about now is, if we're not enjoying the life we're living, let's take ourselves to a different place. If we're not enjoying the body that we're in or the skin that we're in, let's look at a place we want to, I'm giving hints to the next song now. Which is The Good Life, A Place You Want to Go. Again, another tune from my youth. But I remember when I was in the gym on Friday in Body Pump, and it was in Burn, and this song came on and it just started. Yeah, I'm talking to my body. I am taking my body to a new place. I'm going to take it to the new level, the next level of life and health and fitness. And that's the thing, it's about when you read a book is taking you to that next level of life, of understanding, of acceptance of others, having more empathy for others. Imagine that if the people from the 1950s and the 70s had more access to knowledge from people around the world, and we'd have had more acceptance. But again, we have all of this knowledge now through social media and through books, and a lot more people have access to books, and yet we still have this level of ignorance. So let's just really dive deep into who we are and look at the world we want to create and actually go there. Let's go and say, you know what, we want to have peace, we want to learn. And I don't understand why people don't want to learn. So I'm just going to take a break and have a sip of my tea, and I'm going to leave you with Bullet Tooth, A Place You Want to Go by Good Life.
You're listening to The Literary Lounge with Dawn Bates on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM.
Let me take you to a place I know you want to go. This is Good Life. Absolutely. I remember that tune and, looking around and smiling at people. And it was just like, yeah, let the music take you to a place you want to go. And again, when I was saying, when I was in the gym and I heard that, I was like, oh, yeah, like I am going to take this body to a place I know it wants to go. Because I know that I do not want to hit 50 in about 18 months and not be able to move and not be able to do all the things I want to do. Now, I want to be that fit grandma that, is running around after her grandkids. That's actually, when we go on holiday, when I take them on holiday and we actually do fun things together, I want to be able to do all of those things. I don't want to be that grandma that just sits there and watches from the sidelines. I want them to have the craziest grandma that they can ever have, that is up for adventures. I want to be the naughtiest one, obviously. And again, it's like when you look at the way in which families are these days, they are we all live in different places. A lot of us, families have been fragmented. They have, they're blended families from one family to another. They're different ethnicities. And it was really important for me when I had the boys and I was choosing a school for them. Not just that there were different ethnicities and nationalities in the school, but actually that the families within those schools were made up of different ethnicities and nationalities. My children have got the Egyptian Palestinian, they've got the English, the Scottish, and the Welsh heritage. And, so they're like, and it was for them to be around children that had got all of those different kinds of ethnicities and identities. Because I remember when we would go and visit my ex-husband's family, so I'd be like, do you feel more Egyptian or do you feel more Palestinian? Do you belong here? And it's like everywhere is your home when you choose it to be your home. Are you choosing your body as your home, or are you just treating your body as an afterthought? Are you nourishing your mind? Are you learning how to be the very best version of yourself? Now, this week I've done a talk on the menopause and the book and all the research I had to do to be able to produce the potent power of menopause, which you can actually get on from my website. You go to dawnbates.com/menopause. You'll be able to find a link to the book and find out a little bit more about it. We also have mugs and merchandise for each of my books because, again, it's about learning what people want, and people don't just want to give a gift anymore. They want to give, a present. It's not just a book. Oh, it's just a book. No, it's a book and a mug, and there'll be other additional merchandise. We're actually planning all of that at the moment. And again, this is the thing. It's like looking at the world of publishing through the eyes of a reader. What are people experiencing when they buy a book? What do they do when they buy a book? I have to look at what lens could people be reading this through? When I worked on a parenting book recently, the person who I was working with, she was only looking at the story of parenting through the eyes of a white middle class American family where they were still happily married, they had one child, and they had a very supportive family around them. Not everybody has that. And it was about getting this author to actually look at the world through so many different lenses, and making sure that, when we get on that journey to sharing who we are and becoming the very best version of ourselves, whether that is as, someone who's fit and healthy, ready for their 50th and wants to be the best grandma like I do, or whether it's somebody who is wanting to become, the top of their field, or they want to be the first one in their family to go to university, or they want to be the first person in their family to buy their own home. All of these are massive milestones for a lot of people, and it's about understanding what the distance traveled is. Because again, when you look at the children that have been, given up for adoption, or these ladies that have had, their babies taken away from them, the trauma involved in that, and that actually impacts people's success later on in life. Some people will become a success in spite of it, but some people can never get past that level of rejection. And I've always said to salespeople, that have gone there, well, if you really wanted it, you would actually go out and sell. And I'm like, yeah, but have you ever had one of your main caregivers reject you or give you away? Have you ever experienced such a deep level of rejection? Because if you haven't, then you don't know what it is that people are going through and why some people are adverse to sales. Because we don't want that no. We don't want to be rejected over and over and over again. Now, I'm that person who I'm like, okay, I'm just going to face this head on. I did cold calling. I did sorry folks, I did the telemarketing. I sold double glazing. I sold newspaper advertising. I was like, I am going to meet this demon head on. If I'm going to be a successful businesswoman, I've got to learn to sell. But people who've been through trauma, such as the children who are in these homes, and the women who had to give up their family, because they were choosing to give birth to the baby, or people who have been abandoned, or people who've had their heart broken after a long marriage, or any these children that have always had their dreams rejected by their parents. They're seeking for something. They want that success in whatever it is that their idea of success is. They're on this journey. They want to become something better than they've got. We have this phrase, I wanted to give my children a better life than I had. And excuse the snoring in the background, that is Chewy. If you can't hear it, then at least, if you can hear it, my goodness. She is going for it. She's going to go for the award of best snorer in the world, obviously, because that's, if you're going to be around me, I'm going to brainwash you into thinking you're the best version of yourself, and you're going to go for even better. And those people that do work with me, whether it's on me helping them write their business plan or write their book and expand their brand and what have you, I will make sure that you see your full potential, and I will be that biggest cheerleader for you. And then my next song, I absolutely love this. It's such a fun track, and it takes me back. I'm taking you back to some of the songs that really resonated with me on my journey. And it was so lovely to hear some of these songs again and actually share with you some of the songs I would listen to at the beginning of my success journey. And this is called the Supermen Lovers, and it's called Starlight. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And then we're going to have the ads. Oh, such a fun song. Such a fun song. Oh, just great. Yeah, and they're seeking fame and fortune. Like they want to make their parents proud, and they want to be that best version of themselves. But again, the children in those adoptive homes, how could they ever make their parents proud when everything was stacked against them? These women that were their mothers that had their child taken away, they were put in these houses, and it was like they were shameful to their parents. The parents didn't rally around them. They were just abandoned in these birthing homes, for want of a better phrase. And even like people like myself, who I have my parents, but I don't have a great relationship with them. And I always wanted to make them proud. And then the day I realized, you know what, I'm never really going to make them proud. It doesn't matter what I've achieved. It doesn't matter what how many books I've written, that I've got a radio show, or I've been on these podcasts, or I've traveled the world, and all of these things. I'm never going to make my parents proud. I've got to make myself proud of me. Am I proud of myself? You bet I'm proud of me. I've dreamed up some really wild and wacky ideas and gone, I'm just going to go do it. Let's see how it works out. And then I'm like, wow, holy moly, I did that. And I remember when I'd written Alpha, the fourth book in the sequel series, I think that was around about my 12th or 13th book. I remember getting on the boat as I'm just about to head down the Amazon River in Brazil, in Belém. That's where I joined, and I was so excited. I was like, "Oh my God, I've just written a book!" And I was so excited. I sent my friend a WhatsApp message, and she said, "Dawn, you've written loads." I went, "Yeah, I know, but I just wrote a book. Oh my gosh!" And I was so excited. And she was like, "You're a crazy nutter." But again, it's because I take such joy in accomplishing things. And I'd done it in spite of my parents. I've done it in spite of all the teachers that said I would only ever amount to, and this is one of the things that I really want to instill on people, that it doesn't matter where you've come from. It's all those little goals that you set for yourself that become the big goals. And we are so capable of achieving so much. And yes, a lot of us do live with trauma. It does impact our bodies. It does impact our confidence. It does impact our levels of self-worth. And the people that have gone through life with a supportive family, and parents cheering them on and being there for them, That's a privilege that not a lot of people have. And and people talk about, different levels of privilege. If you've got money, you're privileged. If you're white, you're privileged. If you have got a supportive husband while you're building a business, you're privileged. If you've got children, you're privileged. This whole conversation started with that news article last night about how, this, these children were taken away and from their parents, and then how, you know, um, you've got, this MBE being given to the lioness, and she's not recognizing she's very humble in her gratitude of making a difference to the people who look like her. She even said, that she even said that she didn't feel that she had done much. And, you know, but I mean, I think there's like 40 odd goals that she scored. Like she'd made over almost 100 appearances in the years that she, um, you know, this is such an incredible example. I mean, I don't think I could score 43 goals. Um, Big jumpers for goalposts, really. I'm not a footballer by anybody's stretch of the imagination. I like a game of rounders. I like netball and I love hockey, grass hockey. Um, but again, it's like the young girls that never had access to football or access to sport because of certain social situations or certain um, restrictions because of their skin color. Uh, you know, Kerry was such an incredible example for them. And I've always said that, for um, those of us women who do not honour the women who died and fought for our rights to vote, to work, to do the things that we take for granted, we're actually dishonouring all of the women that died for us to have these rights. And all the mothers that make all the excuses of not achieving something because they've got children. Stop blaming your children. There are lots of women that have gone through pregnancies and not ended up with a child, or they've had a stillbirth, or they've not been able to get pregnant. That's really harsh for those people. And I understand that to a degree because I helped coach the women who appeared in my Owning Our Ovaries book. Again, you'll find that on doorbates.com. But so many of us have so much privilege and so many advantages. But whatever we're going through, we really can overcome it if we really want to. The only thing that's going to stop us from achieving the results and the success that we want in life is ourselves. And, if we are going through trauma, write it out. I say this every week. Write it out. Really understand what that pain is and where it's coming from. In all of the books that I've produced, we've written journaling questions in there for you to explore what it is that you want to be doing, and what comes up for you when you read certain things. At the end of all the anthologies, there are reflection pages for you to make notes, for you to learn and to write down what resonated with you in these books, because it's about these books becoming living, breathing books for you, to transform your life. And the other thing that I loved about that Supermen book, the Supermen Lovers song Starlight, is it reminds me of a phrase that Annie, who I wrote her biography, her son Caleb said that you cannot become famous where you're from. And I realized this because overseas, I when I was in Australia, I was sat in a cafe. I'd only been in Port Douglas less than 24 hours and someone recognised me. I can go to the States, I get recognised, but here in Britain, no, hardly anybody knows about me. And we have a real tall poppy syndrome here in Britain. We don't like people being more successful than us. We don't like people coming here and telling us what to do. We're the British, don't you know? And sometimes you have this aspect of, especially in business, where some people think that they're a big fish, but they're actually, they might be a big fish in a small pond. But then when they meet someone like me, I've had someone say to me, you're going to find it really, really challenging here. because you've traveled the world and you've achieved a lot and you've come back, and a lot of people wouldn't even dare dream of some of the things you've done. But that's not going to stop me from going on to achieve, and we shouldn't allow other people to stop us from dreaming and dreaming big and writing out those plans and really writing letters from our future self to the person we are now. And that's something that I'm really going to encourage you to do this week. Write a letter to the version of yourself that you want to come. Have that person, that version of you, write a letter to the person you are now and to your child, your inner child, the person who would be dreaming these big, bold dreams, or the person that never got to dream. Because a lot of kids, they don't get to dream. They don't know how to dream because they are living a life that's stopping them from doing that. And I really do encourage you to really check out what's possible, for yourself. And what do you want? What have you been through in life? What skills have you learned? How can you harness the power of all of them? Because these are going to tell you what your purpose is. What are the things that you've been through in life that you can help other people through? These are the things that you're going through all of this for a reason. There is a reason all of these things are happening, and you have absolutely got the power. And I really do want you all to, if you haven't picked up one of my books, or you haven't picked up a self-help book or a book of somebody who's achieving what it is that you want to achieve, go and do it. Go and spend some time in the library if you can't afford books. Check out the local library. There's some incredible books in there. Or go and purchase a book. And one of the books that I would say is Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by Bob Proctor. You can get these online, and there's a workbook that goes with them. So really, an incredible book that I really do encourage you. Yeah, and if you want a dirty, smutty book by somebody who, has had it going against her, but absolutely had everything going for her, go and read the Miriam Margolyes' book. She's very, very funny. And I'm going to be heading off, as I said, to Geneva early next week. And so I'm going to be reading The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And when I grow up as a fiction writer, I want to be like Donna Tartt. Well, Donna Tartt, Elif Shafak, and Doris Lessing. That would be the ultimate for me. But I'm going to play you a song now, a tune. It's really upbeat. It's going to take us into the weekend. I love it. I love Jay Warrer. But his just Jay Warrer. The first time I heard this song, I think I had to rewind it and play it about 4 or 5 times. I was jumping around the kitchen. I was having a proper kitchen rave. I'm always having a bit of a kitchen rave. But yes, so I hope you've enjoyed today. It is a lot stronger and probably a bit more controversial than normal. But you did ask me to be a bit more of myself. I have been more of myself. So whatever it is, have a fantastic weekend. And this is Jay Warrer with Check Out.
You've been listening to the Literary Lounge with Dawn Bates on Radio Cardiff at 98.7 FM and DAB Radio. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be with you again next week.